So Oliver, if I was looking to build my own house, where would I start?
That's a good question, isn't it? I suppose that, well, the first thing is, I suppose, to find, you want to find a plot of land, don't you? Yeah?
Plot of land or a old building that's not in a great state, that you can get a good value, that you can knock down and...
Which is sometimes better, isn't it? There's a problem, this goes back to early conversation, the problem with plots of land is you do need to make sure that you can build something on it. You need to make sure it's in the development boundaries, various different things. But if you've got a plot that's already got an old building on, usually that's a much easier way or a much safer way to know that you
pretty much you're guaranteed to get planning.
If it's already got a dwelling on there and you're replacing it with a dwelling, as long as you don't go too mad, you know, it's a pretty good chance.
I mean, considerations like, you know, if you're on Greenbelt, there's going to be a limitation on how big you can make it. So that's one important consideration. So we've had that with a client before, is they're looking to buy a plot of land which had an existing bungalow on it. So what you look at is within the Greenbelt, you still got permitted development rights. So you see how much you can extend with permitted development, and then you can get a sense of how big the new building can be. So it's really important to understand, if you're doing that, what you're buying and what your limitations are.
Yeah, because as well, like, how big do you want the house? Because it might be that, you know, you can't probably get a house as big as what you want.
Well, that was one of the reasons why he didn't buy it, because, you know, he realised that, you know, he wanted a house which was, you know, 400 metres squared, but only realised probably could get planning for about 300, so he didn't do it.
So that's the first place to start. So I suppose you need to get your land. There's various different ways of doing that. This previous conversations, you could have an option agreement with someone, but the point is you need to find a site that you think would make a good place. What do you do next?
What do you do next? Well, you'd assume that the plot that you've got, you don't want to get something, you know, without planning permission. It doesn't matter so much if it's outline or full. The point is you should have something in principle. So be very aware of buying sites, cheap plots of land with no planning permission in place, because it's very, very risky. So the next stage costly. So the next stage after purchasing the land, I mean, ideally you want to speak to like an architect.
That's what I thought you was going to say. I was like, what's the next thing you're going to do? And I thought you was going to say, talk to me.
Well,
talk to an architect.
That's what they should do. So before you purchase the land, speak to an architect, understand what are the limitations regards to size, style of the plot, and what could be built there. And then after, you know, seeking advice from everyone, then look at purchasing.
The other thing is sometimes we'll do a quick appraisal, but in some instances it might even be worth having like a paid consultation with an architect or a planning consultant, because at the end of the day, this is a lot of money. You know, if you want to build your dream house, you want to make sure that you can build your dream house.
And it won't be on a plot of land that's usually costing £5,000.
Yeah, so it's a big investment, a big risk. So the reality is it's probably worth paying for a little bit of advice. So someone properly looks at that site, properly looks at the history, spends some proper time to say, right, what do we think we can get on here? It might even be that you want to even do a pre-app before you buy it. And that the important thing about pre-apps, so pre-apps are good and bad, aren't they? We could talk forever about pre-apps.
But it's informal, whereas a planning application is formal.
It's also not in the public eye.
True.
So you can do a pre-app on a piece of land without even telling the person, or without even making an offer or telling anyone you're going to buy it. So it's completely hidden from view. So you can, in theory, get a bit of a look to see whether you can get something on, and then you can structure your offer based on that. So it can be a useful tool, but it is informal.
It will depend on the plot. I mean, because if there's an existing permission in place, say for a single dwelling of a sort of size, then I think, you know, you'd be fairly sure you'd be okay. But there's things that have come up in the past. I mean, what was that site which you took on that had issues, that had planning permission and had issues with drainage and sewerage?
Oh yeah. So it had outline planning permission for a bungalow.
So there's still risks.
Everything was all going on, because I think it got that and that was approved, and they tweaked the design, but there wasn't enough space. That was it. They were relying on a connection into the mains, but there was no mains. So the only way to do it was to
This is where your searches come in.
Treat the drainage on site, But the problem is the site isn't big enough to treat the drainage, which means that the only other option is like a cess tank or cesspool. The point is
smelly.
that the house has had to be redesigned in order to get all this stuff to fit. So, and this comes back onto another one that always comes up, is just because you've got planning permission for something, outline planning, doesn't mean you can build it.
No.
Because it's a sort of building regs issue, but also a planning issue. The point is there is some permission there, but what they've got permission for, it can't be built because you can't make the drainage work.
Yeah, so you got planning that could have permission, but then you've got building regs. Another thing also to consider is existing way rights, covenants, legal stuff which is outside planning. So when you put it in for a planning permission, things like covenants are not considered. Things like building regs are usually not considered. And some things, small things, are like M42 disabled requirements or regards to water, water calculations, usage, and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, not everything is covered in there. So there's always kind of risks. So
it's a good one.